So, Maggie, are you a fruit fly or a fag hag?
It was very difficult. Instead of a 35mm film now, I'm doing it in digital in someone's fucking apartment.
We're like my best friend.
I'm probably known as about the weirdest kid in school.
There was something in my house.
For today's stack, I'm delving into 5 films spanning the career of Jason Paul Collum, a director you might not have heard of before. Jason actually sent me these movies for review, something that I really don't recommend others do because I am, to put it mildly, pretty honest. So let me get something out of the way right off the bat. These are not movies that mainstream viewers will like. Full stop. With one exception, they are very amateurish in quality, and anyone not well versed in what it takes to make a movie is very likely to dismiss them with some pretty harsh sentiments. Now, whether or not that is called for is really down to your critical philosophy, but the point is, I am giving these movies a bit of a handicap. All of them are low budget. Jason himself quoted roughly $13,000 per feature, I think. Which is basically nothing, especially when you have a crew like he does and, you're paying people. As a comparison, my film The Head cost roughly $3 to $5 grand, and I had almost no crew, and basically everyone worked on it as a favor. So, movies are expensive, no matter how cheap as fuck they are. With that preamble out of the way, let's just dig in, going in order from oldest to newest, starting with Something to Scream About.
Fay Wray's immortalization in cinema history as the first actress known for the piercing tone of terror exuding from her lungs as she was taken hostage by King Kong in 1933.
Brinke Stevens of Slumber Party Massacre fame tackles hosting duties in this 2003 documentary about Scream Queens. The late Julie Strain, Deborah DeLiso, I think is how you say her name, Denise Duff, Debbie Rochon, Brandy Burkett, Felissa Rose, Lilith Stabbs, Oriana Albright, and of course, Night of the Living Dead's very own Judith O'Dea all sit down for interviews. Now, right off the bat, there is one glaring issue. Brinke Stevens isn't one of the ladies being interviewed, which is frustrating, mostly because she's more of a scream queen than most of the ladies I listed, and her hosting leaves, and I hate to say this, it leaves a lot to be desired. In fact, you could cut it entirely and no one would be the wiser. It is, I understand Jason's idea behind it, I don't think it works at all. Now, for a shot on video, low budget documentary from this time period on such a niche subject, it's pretty well done. I'm not sure I need it as a standalone release, but if this was a bonus feature or streaming for free, it's certainly worth a look. To some extent, the film tackles low pay, nudity, sexism, working with first-time directors, and in the opening, it suggests that it'll tackle racism, but that never really comes back up again after the initial mention, at least as far as I can remember. Anyway, if we're going to be super real for a moment, there's a bit of a cringe element at times that's a little tough. Some, like Debbie Rochon, get by just fine, thanks to plenty of experience and being, a certified legend of low to no budget cinema. On the other hand, some just come off as self-important.
And I've done that for so many years for people, and I will pick and choose who I do that for, people that really deserve it. But the people that are trying to pick me now don't really deserve that. And I feel a bit exploited in that.
Others like Lilith Stab and, I hate to say it, Julie Strain, feel either too inexperienced or too bitter. In fact, I don't know why Lilith Stabs is in here, other than being an easy get. Nothing against her personally, but her career was only getting started at this point, and without delving into that aspect, there's not much to her inclusion. Strain seems like she just hated making movies, and that gets a little tiring after a while. You know, I want plenty of honesty in these, but come on, like, it's just complaining nonstop. Obviously, it's a tough gig, but Debbie Rochon does a great job getting this across without being utterly miserable. And let's be honest, Debbie Rochon's like the hardest worker out of the whole damn bunch.
Then the first time watching in a big screen at Cannes, I was just like, I was so mortified.
Another big issue here is that a lot of these interviews don't feel super personalized. We get a few fun anecdotes, but a lot of it feels a bit empty. As you might expect, the more experienced, the less this is a problem. It's also very much a talking head piece with nothing much else to watch beyond a whole bunch of movie clips, many of which are from movies you've probably never seen, and in some cases might never see, as many were in post-production when the doc was made. Available in the merch store. It also feels a bit rushed. Either the interviews themselves were a bit limited or the film was just too edited down, but this might all have to do with the questions not having the sufficient follow-ups. It's hard to tell. At the end of the day, though, I appreciate the documentary. I do wish it went deeper into specific stories from these films, since they're not the sort of flicks you're going to hear a lot about to begin with, and I wish I could have gotten a better understanding of these women. At one point near the end, Lilith Stabs mentions her dominatrix career, and I legit thought I'd missed something, but no, it's just kind of dropped in there and never brought up again. Like, come on, her transformation from that to being an actress sounds like a fun story. Give me them nuggets. Still, it flies by. The whole movie flies by. Thanks primarily to it being an hour long. But although, I mean, I could have gone 2 hours if it just, you know, went deep into anything. But there's no treading water, no fat, just a clean talking head documentary about a very specific side of B filmmaking. So yeah, while I have many issues, most of my criticisms are pretty inconsequential. This is a very serviceable documentary that could have used a bit more in-depth interviews, but for the time and presumably the lowest budget of the bunch, this is perfectly okay. I wish it could have delved further into actual production stories and specifics instead of fairly general ruminations on careers in low to no budget film acting. Oh, and it was produced and edited by J.R. Bookwalter, who we'll be discussing in depth in the near future. I can't say that it benefits greatly from his editing. I hate to say, because I do like J.R. Bookwalter, but yikes. On the extra side of things, introducing Lizzie Strain is 5 minutes of cringe, baby. Oh, Julie Strain's half-sister edition of 5 minutes of cringe. It's a weird puff piece that feels greasy. Debbie Rochon, 1986, Student Films, is also 5 minutes and interesting as an artifact, but not what I would call particularly good. Julia Wept is Collum's first film starring Brinke Stevens. It's 30 minutes and begins with that fake Poe quote from the top of Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Shows promise, though. In fact, it's almost like a nice prep for our next film, which, October Moon.
Oh, gee, Elliot.
Please, Corin. I promise. I'll just sleep in the trailer and I'll spend the rest of the weekend by myself. You won't even know I'm there.
So October Moon is interesting. It's an early gay horror film from the yesteryears of 2005, which our main dude, in which our main dude sounds like Jay Baruchel. And that was literally my first note. Nothing against the movie. It's just that was the first thing I wrote down.
Just a little bit cute.
Anyway, to call this the first gay horror film would be inaccurate, since Hellbent beat it by a year, and even that one is debatable since there were queer horror films before, depending on your definition, like High Tension, for example. However, as Collum points out, this could very well be one of, if not the first queer horror films to paint the gay characters in a good light. I mean, minus one of them being bug nuts crazy. Either which way, it was one of the films to pioneer queer horror at the very least. October Moon follows an openly gay man, Corinne, played by Sean Michael Lambrecht, his assistant Nancy, played by Brink Stevens, and Corinne's boyfriend, Jake, played by Jeff Dillon.
So if we do all this and we find someone else?
I guess we found the answer.
Their world is unfortunately invaded by total nutbar Elliot, played quite well by Jared Howard, who, in addition to being pretty obviously repressed, has a deeply homophobic religious zealot for a mother and quickly grows a disturbing attachment to Corinne.
Because I love him.
Things go, well, not great, as Corinne allows Elliot into his life and introduces him to gay culture. Now, the script has a bit of a try-hard student vibe at times. It's by no means the worst, but it's one of those little things that hurts the immersion factor for me. We get these really adult, strong themes about emotional abuse and homophobia, and it's all just so... it's very two-dimensional. That doesn't mean that the broad strokes aren't there. In fact, I'll just say right now, I think this is a great concept, and for the time, a pretty brave story to attempt. Hell, this is back when people were still making excuses about how gay marriage would destroy America. It's easy to forget how medieval we were less than 20 years ago. And now, out of all of these, the audio is at its worst here. It's not great.
Can we change the subject?
What is wrong with you?
I'll say this though, it's mostly discernible enough. And for a film of this budget at this time with a skeleton crew, it's totally fine. In fact, I'm not really going to comment on the audio going forward. Just know that with one exception, it's generally not great, whether that's due to amateurish recording or just locations with poor acoustics, which I've certainly been the victim of. Yes, she was a wonderful child.
She lives on in my heart and in our quest as an outsider.
Anyway, point is, there are a lot of distractions that wound up hurting my ability to really appreciate what Collum accomplished here. In other, even smaller budgeted films, these things can be overlooked thanks to wacky plots and outlandish characters, but Collum was trying to make a fairly serious film. It's a B-movie. It still has some weird shit going on, but the focus is a serious plot buoyed by serious characters. Unfortunately, bad production values and drama rarely work together. This is actually, honestly, a good lesson for first-time filmmakers. If you don't have, like, the tools at hand, don't attempt a serious drama, because you will fail miserably. Anyway, let's talk about the acting. Oh boy. Judith O'Dea is, of course, her usual classy self, here portraying Elliot's Bible-thumping mother, who has a slight case of the hates gaze. While I do like her performance, the film's general handling of homophobia leaves a bit to be desired. Actually, most of the straight talk is pretty much unbearable, and a lot of the gay talk doesn't fare much better. I don't think that's necessarily a problem with Collum's understanding of either. In fact, I think he's a hella knowledgeable dude, but more so the kind of edgy student vibe I mentioned earlier. Now, Corinne seems like a bit of a stand-in for Collum. He even has the poster for Something to Scream About in his office. Sasha Sackett is actually pretty good in the role relative to the rest of the cast. In fact, Brink Stevens, Jared Howard, Sackett, and O'Dea are easily the standouts, delivering good enough performances and making the most of the dialogue. Jeff Dylan Graham, who plays Corinne's boyfriend Jake, is also pretty commendable. The rest of the supporting cast, not so much. Every so often, there's some good tense moments that show Collum can be a visual storyteller. Unfortunately, they're weighed down by a lot of talking, which I hate to say. But now, as we progress past the setup and into Elliot's psychosis, October Moon takes a turn into entertaining territory. Even the DV cinematography starts to feel like a choice rather than a burden. Some moments, like Nancy finding Elliot's weird book or whatever's happening here, feel like parody, but that helps to keep the pacing up in the back half. With a near 2-hour runtime, well, that's much appreciated. Which, second lesson, guys, and I've done this twice now, just make your movie an hour and a half, for fuck's sake. Now, eventually I did get used to the flaws. The traditionally bad acting transformed into my new normal, and the audio-visual components started to only rarely jump out at me. Writing tended to still bug me, but there were plenty of fun bits and bobs in the dialogue and plotting to keep me entertained.
Hey, what do you think, buddy? Did you eat pussy as old as your mom's?
You know, you ain't had pussy till you had the pussy that had you.
The final moments are actually surprisingly intense, minus some awkward production design. It's a pretty heart-pounding experience. This is a very ambitious project. And kudos to J.R. Bookwalter for backing it and Collum for undertaking it. The easy path would have been to go overly comical or cheap gore fest, but instead they opted for something more drama than horror. I can't say truthfully that it works, but it's at least an admirable effort and even kinda entertaining. Now, extras-wise, we get a 10-minute making-of documentary featuring Collum, explaining the very personal inspiration behind the story. It's more an interview than a traditional making-of, but it's pretty informative, and it gives, just the right amount of background for how October Moon came together. Now, on the same disc, we got October Moon 2, November Sun. It continues basically where October Moon left off, and for the sake of those interested in watching these, I'm not going to delve into this one too much. Suffice it to say, plot-wise, that we're focusing on the effects of October Moon's finale on the surviving characters, with a twist that some might see coming, and some might not. I recognize that that's a pretty generic description, but hey, it's the truth. Now, we do get an upgrade in camera work, with this not only being shot in 16:9, but also just generally looking less grody. However, that's really where the upgrades stop. We get more interesting dialogue.
What? One of these times you're going to catch me with a knife in my hand and it'll be short one nut.
And that's not helped by some of the actors, including the return of Darcy Vanderhoff? Darcy Vanderhoff, who's just... she's a very bad actress. I hate to say it, because I know Jason loves her, and she seems like a great gal, but damn... there's already enough low rent about these productions, and she just makes it feel like a high school production. And it hurts me to say that. Like, I hate bad-mouthing actors, but she's not good at acting. She's just not.
No. Well, yeah.
Again, seems like a great person, not a good actor. Now, small spoiler, Judith O'Dea returns, so that's nice, and says a lot about how personable Jason must be. We also get the lovely addition of Debbie Rochon, who's sadly barely in the film and is only there to help with our big twist. Sasha Sackett plays our new gay Eli. Physically, he's a big upgrade, while acting-wise, he's not too bad. I was never thrilled with him, and his final scene leaves a lot to be desired, but he's serviceable in the role, while basically giving the OG cast someone to work off of. After all, Brink Stevens and Judith O'Dea are the real stars here. It's interesting to see O'Dea's character soften, even if it is in a disturbed way, and Brink Stevens is always nice to see. Like last film, I feel like she could have benefited from a little stronger direction. I feel like Brink Stevens is the kind of actor who you gotta direct her, or else you're not gonna necessarily get the best performance, which is nothing against her. That's just, that's how some actors work. The aforementioned twist is partially telegraphed really hard, but the whole of the reveal is actually pretty nicely done and brings things full circle in a way you wouldn't expect after the first film's conclusion. Of course, the drama of it all is hurt by little details, like the use of a prop knife that appears to have been bought at Party City, and a final shot that perhaps felt pretty cathartic on paper, but is pretty laughable on screen. I'm not going to show it, but it's just... you couldn't have found a better location for that, man. Now, for this part of the disc, we get another making of. This one's 14 minutes. Again, more an interview with Jason Paul Collum than a traditional making of. Luckily, he's great to listen to, so it's another successful explanation of how the film came to be made, including a rushed production, mishaps in the effects department, real-life trauma, and why he chose to focus on the women from the first film. The other extra on the disc, aside from some image galleries, is a 30-minute look back at the films, again featuring Collum, this time joined by others from the cast, including Judith O'Dea, who I didn't realize until this doc is gay, which, that's cool. So there you go, folks. One of the OG queens of horror, Barbara herself, is part of the LGBT community. Hell yeah! That's all I got. Good for her. So with all this said, you might think I didn't like the October Moon duology, but actually they're shockingly watchable movies. I watched them mostly by myself, and I was pretty engrossed in the character dynamics and melodrama. sort of melodramatic, horror-tinged shenanigans, let's call them. If you're not as easy an audience as I am, there's enough cringe and oddball choices that having a fun viewing party with friends is, it's recommended. They're both so soap operatic, silly, and confident in themselves that they overcome all of their many, many shortcomings and wind up shockingly watchable by virtue of being very honest with them. Very honest about who they are.
Oh.
All right, next up, we've got Screaming in High Heels, The Rise and Fall of the Scream Queen, which is Collum's follow-up to the documentary Something to Scream About. And man, it is a night and day difference between the two. You can tell he was working with a bit more high-end equipment, more of a budget, and a better editor. Derek Carey, he takes the duties here. He had previously edited Collum's Slumber Party Massacre documentary and produced and edited a little delight called Swamphead, which I highly recommend. He also has a podcast I've been on called Astro Radio Z, also highly recommended. Big ol' shout out. Also, I have a Patreon. Go give money to that. What else can I shill? Got a merch store? It doesn't matter. Anyway, part of the beauty of this documentary is its simplicity. Instead of trying to bring in as many Scream Queens as possible, Collum focuses on the Nightmare Sisters themselves, Linnea Quigley, Brinke Stevens, and Michelle Bauer. Now, we learn all about their backgrounds, their careers, and how the Scream Queen phenomenon of the 80s, rose and fell. Tons of fun stories from all three, bolstered by additional interviews from genre hallmarks like Fred Olen Ray and David Dakota. It does feel a bit like a puff piece at times, perhaps a little revisionist, but the fact is that these three ladies were very popular among the crowd eating up horror on the home video market in the 80s, and so it makes sense to follow them specifically. There were, of course, more popular Scream Queens, but that's really not the focus, despite what the title might suggest. This is about these three ladies and the video market they helped build. Now, honestly, I don't have anything else to say about the movie itself. It's just a little short, just over an hour, but I can't say it skimps on very many elements, at least nothing notable. It's just a fucking great little documentary. Extras-wise, we get additional interview footage, which comes out to roughly 14 minutes for each of the three ladies. As if that weren't enough, we get a 33-minute reunion special from 10 years later, aka last year, conducted over a video call and featuring all kinds of fun little tidbits, including an update on a sequel to Sorority Babes in the Slimebo Wolorama. There's also a 9-minute intro by Collum and Quigley at Flashback Weekend, as well as a much older 22-minute convention appearance by Collum and Brinke at a separate Flashback Weekend event. This is all rounded out by a stills gallery tying up a very, very admirable little package. Straight up, buy this Blu-ray. It's great. Oh, I slammed it down like that. Finally, we come to Collum's most recent feature, 2017's Safe Inside, which was actually shot a few years prior to the release over the course of 5 days in his century-old house. That fact actually goes a long way in helping the film, since the sometimes awkward nature of the set is actually a sort of fascinating behind-the-scenes detail that is heavily worked into the plot.
Funky.
Remember when I told you the house was built in 1900? The living room and kitchen were added in the 50s?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of weird things like this. I keep finding them every time I tear down walls or pull up carpet.
Unfortunately, that plot is kind of boring.
Monster in the house, this is stupid.
Where the October Moon duology is entertaining thanks to its overdone melodrama, Safe Inside plays things pretty safe. And while we do get a very soap operatic twist that's somewhat humorous, it all winds up feeling pretty ho-hum. Our plot centers on JJ, aka Jason, whose mother was a notable horror actress whose stage name was Crystal Lake. Yeah, I don't do that.
That wasn't even your real name.
Anyway, JJ is contending with some serious psychological trauma due to his mother's fairly recent death, which is exacerbated by some relationship issues with his wife and the work he's been doing on the house his mother left him. Now, I really wish Collum had gone a little further with this one. Having our main character be a straight, frustratingly lame duck, sad sack really brings things down several notches. Just the act of having him be gay and presenting the same story through that lens would make up for some of the narrative shortcomings and low-end production values. Although to be fair, this is his best looking narrative film, and while I wasn't thrilled with the lighting, at worst it's fine. At best, it succeeds in setting the mood. There's some really good work with filters here. He really tries to put a lot more of an artistic spin on things, but the lack of a shallow depth of field really, it kind of hurts the gravitas, in my opinion. I know that's a kind of a dumb thing, especially for someone like me to complain about, but I feel like if he had used, like if the DP had used more prime lenses, give this sucker a f1.8 lens, make that, like, stop it right at 5.6. If it goes anything above 5.6, no. Bring that, open that bitch up.
Primes? Using any primes?
I guess you might say the cinematography in Safe Inside is, safe. Yeah, I just reused that joke. Fuck you.
Think we need an inky?
Speaking of safe, Collum brings along his usual stable of actors for the most part, including Judith O'Dea in a small but memorable role as Jason's very poorly named mother. Brink Stevens plays Jason's friend Betsy, Betsy Palmer. God damn it, I just got that, you son of a bitch. Who sadly has to open the film with this awful line.
Good?
It's perfect.
Can I get anyone anything else? More wine?
Does anyone need anything?
Besides a sip of you? No, I'd say we're all fine.
For Jason, we get Christopher D. Harder, who, is that really his name? Oh my God. We get Christopher D. Harder, who, you're a professional, who had worked with Collum on his sophomore feature, 5 Dark Souls. Props to him, he's actually not too shabby. Maybe under-directed at times, but he's relatable where he needs to be, despite, as I said, playing a pretty lame duck dude. On the positive side, I do really appreciate Collum's patience and passion, the 2 Ps that really make all of these movies work to varying degrees. I think a filmmaker with more pessimism and bloodlust would have turned this into a real slog, but like with the others, I was kept interested throughout. I just wish the finale had as much going for it. I won't spoil anything, but it relies on 2 of the worst performances in the film and includes some incredibly laughable moments, including some makeup that makes perfect sense in context, like if you just are considering the logistics of the twist, but it should have been given more attention for the sake of impact. It needed to be one of those makeup choices that went overboard, and it just doesn't. There's some experimentation on display here that's fun, and the twist does make subsequent viewings more enjoyable since you can look out for it and does have an effect on everything you've seen. But I think Safe Inside is my least favorite of Collum's features. I have a feeling I'll probably be in the minority on that one, but that's something, there's something about about how outlandish October Moon and its sequel rather are. I wish there was a third one. And it hit me just right, despite the more in-your-face production problems. This one has those mostly fixed, but seems to trade off in plot, which is kind of frustrating. There's also the issue of some of the other performances that I didn't talk about, like Darcy Vanderhoff, who I don't want to rag on her, but she's just not convincing in any of these movies. She is, however, at least better than Jason's neighbor, Georgianne, played by another Collum company player, Karen DeLue. Yeah, not a fan.
You totally freaked me out last night.
The first notable extra, and something that, of course, I always like to see, is a commentary track by Collum and his editor, Derek Carey. And this is where I'm actually going to go ahead and recommend this release with a little asterisk, a little baby butthole next to it. This is a great commentary for filmmakers to listen to, and for those with a more mean-spirited take on these kinds of films. No matter what problems I can find, and as you've heard, I got plenty, it's hard to be too aggressive with my criticisms when I hear all of the love and hard work that went into this film and into the other films. If you're looking to make a movie yourself, especially with any time constraints, and again, Safe Inside was shot in 5 days with very little prep, this is a very informative commentary that, even if you fucking hate watching this movie, is super informative and had my filmmaker brain just jiggling the whole time. By the way, if you're going to release your movie on physical media, include a commentary. Just do it. If you have the ability to talk, and you can find a microphone, they're not expensive. They're really not. Make a commentary, for fuck's sake. Early on, Collum mentions that this was originally meant to be a gay film, and he decided to make the central couple straight to appeal to a wider demographic and give Darcy a bigger role. I disagree with that decision, but fair enough. He also reveals that a lot of this film is based on his own issues, experiences, and neuroses, and I think that's simultaneously what makes these movies work and not work at the same time. On the one hand, that personal element creates a feeling of connection that, again, plays into these films working beyond their issues. On the other hand, I think that his subjectivity and, frankly, kind-heartedness tends to work against him. The commentary definitely supports that, too. He's too nice. You're too nice, Jason. I'm sorry. Them's the facts. You need to be a prick, man. You need to be a fucking just jerk. Beyond that commentary, we get a whole bunch of cast and crew interviews and some galleries. Again, it's a good little disc. Mine's broken. I don't know what happened here, but it got a little busted. But I actually own this on DVD as well, so I don't know what to do with that. But cool. These are all available through MakeFlix, I think. I'm pretty sure they're all available. I'm assuming Something to Scream About is, but I know the other three are available through MakeFlix, so go check those out. Final thoughts. Jason Paul Collum is not a perfect director, not by a long shot. He makes drama, but doesn't hire dramatic actors. He loves horror and B-movies, but rarely invokes the tropes most people want to see, and for that matter, seems totally disinterested in gore and nudity, and even comedy. He takes himself seriously and takes film as an art seriously, but very, very, very rarely implements the lessons he should be learning from the films he loves so much. The movies themselves, the products of his passion, are, to the average viewer, going to be tossed aside as amateurish garbage. They simply don't have the polish or acting chops necessary for a mainstream viewer, or even for fans of B-horror. This is frustrating. However, where these films excel is in their passion. I know I keep using that word, but it really is important here in understanding why I'm not shutting down the collective throat of his filmography. Collum is not lazy. He's not a pessimist. He's not stupid. He's a nice guy making movies that are personal to him because he loves movies. He also loves his friends and his family, which might be his fatal flaw, to be honest. But I can't bag on that because, I mean, it's a good-natured problem to have. With the exception of Screaming in High Heels, it's pretty obvious that these were made by a man without formal training. However, I think that if he could just bring a few ounces of objectivity to his art, then what we would have is someone making pretty solid little indies. For his last two features, he had a more professional crew and a great editor, and those two things made so much of a difference. That's what all directors should learn from this, if they learn anything at all. Filmmaking, it's about collaboration. It doesn't work otherwise. You need to surround yourself with the right people to achieve your vision, and unfortunately, that does include your actors, especially if you want to achieve something with a more dramatic edge. See, I take the easy route. I make movies that know their shit, and so if I get some friends to step in and take a role, then I have more headroom. Collum doesn't give himself the headroom. These two cops in Safe Inside are a perfect example. He wanted two friends who had been in his previous film, Shy of Normal, to have roles, and he made them cops, and they stand out like a fucking sore thumb. And as Derek points out in the commentary, they're just not age appropriate. The audience isn't going to say, oh hey, they're friends of the director, that's cool. They're going to say they don't fit in the scene, and they take them out of the movie. Unfortunately, this problem absolutely plagues Collum's narrative work, and it's too bad because he's almost there. It's so close, but it's not quite. It's not quite. That all said, these are just my opinions. With movies this low budget, opinions will inevitably vary wildly, and I encourage you to seek them out and see for yourself. At the worst, if you pick these up and hate them, you're supporting a dude who is legitimately kind-hearted and has the right intentions. At best, you wind up with some movies that were made for you, and you get the bonus of some enjoyable bonus features. So, let's see here. Big recommend for Screaming in High Heels. Medium recommend for something to scream about, as well as the October Moon duology, although this is probably the best deal overall. And a big ol', I hate to say it, thumbs down for Safe Inside, unless, so this is also a little butthole, unless you want to learn about what to do and what not to do with no budget, rapid turnaround productions, in which case it's a valuable educational tool, which, considering that Jason Paul Collum is a teacher, that, oddly enough, good job. You've created a great teaching asset. But yeah, those are the movies. And it took me a while to put this review together because I don't like being negative. I'm hoping that this video was fairly positive overall, despite all my criticisms. I do think all these movies are worth watching in some capacity. I don't think that any of them, aside from that one doc, are really objectively good. I think that you have to enjoy really like low, no budget movies, and even then you have to be able to look past really serious flaws. But props to Jason for what he's done, what he's accomplished. I mean, he's made a bunch of movies, and that in and of itself is, worth applauding, man. That's great job. And they're actual movies too. I've seen some of the fucking filmmakers who are like putting together bullshit and calling it a feature film and like putting it on their IMDb just to fill that sucker up. I see you motherfuckers, and I don't like you. But that's neither here nor there. If you want to see me do more deep dives into directors' filmographies, please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to check out my merch store, and the Patreon, all that jazz. And that's all I got. This is a long video. Go watch a movie.